court. And now they're saying it again. Time to pack the court. By the way, why do they want 4 justices, 4 new justices on the court? Why not 1? Why not 2? Why not 3? Why not 5? Why do they want 4? Because it's a 6-3 majority for conservatives. A 6-3 majority for people who actually interpret what the Constitution, the law says, versus making it up as you go and making some new policy. They want 4 because they want a 7-6 majority. Plain and simple, raw political power. And they've been willing to do almost anything. Threaten the Supreme Court on the steps of the Supreme Court, leak opinions, bring witnesses in who lie about justices. That's why this hearing is important. And frankly,
what started as a hearing on the Supreme Court suddenly turned into a full-scale political confrontation. Jim Jordan went directly after Democrats, accusing them of threatening the court, leaking opinions, and pushing a dangerous campaign to reshape the judiciary for political power.
As the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you've released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions. Chuck Schumer, March 4th, 2020. Highest-ranking Democrat in our government threatening a separate and equal branch of government. And if you doubt it's a threat, just remember where he made that statement, on the steps of the Supreme Court. And that threat began the 6-year assault on the court by the Democrats. Started with that threat. Then you had Senator Markey say the court's illegitimate. Well, how is that? Every justice I know in the court was actually confirmed by the United States Senate. That's how our Constitution works. How could it be illegitimate? But Senator Markey thought it was. Then we went to something that's never happened. The Democrats leaked the Dobbs opinion in 2022. You talk about trying to undermine a separate and equal branch of government, start leaking the opinions. That's what they did, which resulted in protest at justices' homes, which, by the way, the Justice Department at the time, under the Biden administration and Attorney General Garland, refused to enforce the law. 18 U.S.C. 1507 says you can't protest at a judge's home. And they refused to enforce the law, which of course led to some crazy guy going to Justice Kavanaugh's house with the design to kill Justice of the Supreme Court. Then, of course, we had all the hearings by the Democrats when they were in charge, attacking Justice Thomas, attacking Justice Alito. We had a hearing where a guy come in and lied about Justice Alito and said he leaked some document, which is it. Go back and watch the hearing. Definitely a lie by this guy. And why do they do it? Why do they do it? To concoct some basis for packing the court. And now they're saying it again. Time to pack the court. By the way, why do they want 4 justices, 4 new justices on the court? Why not 1? Why not 2? Why not 3? Why not 5? Why do they want 4? Because it's a 6-3 majority for conservatives. A 6-3 majority for people who actually interpret what the Constitution, the law says, versus making it up as you go and making some new policy. They want 4 because they want a 7-6 majority. Plain and simple, raw political power. And they've been willing to do almost anything. Threaten the Supreme Court on the steps of the Supreme Court, leak opinions, bring witnesses in who lie about justices. That's why this hearing is important. And frankly, I hope we move the constitutional amendment on the floor. I hope there's a vote. And we'll see if these guys want to keep the court at 9, which it should be. It's been there for what, 160 years or something? This whole Carville's talking about it. Former Vice President Harris is talking. They're all talking about it. The ranking member's talking about it. We got to pack the court. Why? Why? Because they don't like the decisions that this good court is giving this country. So thank the chairman for this hearing. Thank our witnesses for being here. I look forward to hearing your testimony, and I yield back.
This hearing quickly transformed into a major political confrontation over the future of the Supreme Court and the growing battle surrounding judicial power in America. What began as a discussion about constitutional protections and the structure of the judiciary rapidly escalated when Jim Jordan accused Democrats of conducting a long-running campaign to pressure and undermine the nation's highest court. His comments immediately raised the stakes of the hearing because this was no longer just about legal disagreements. It became a direct fight over legitimacy, political influence, and institutional trust. Jordan's argument centered heavily around comments made by Chuck Schumer back in 2020 outside the Supreme Court. Jordan revisited Schumer's warning directed at Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and framed it as the starting point of a broader political assault against conservative justices. According to Jordan, that moment symbolized a dangerous shift where elected officials began openly pressuring the judiciary in response to rulings they disagreed with. He argued that since then, attacks on the court have intensified through protests at justices' homes, ethics accusations, public campaigns against conservative judges, and renewed calls to expand the number of justices on the bench. One of the most politically charged moments came when Jordan focused directly on the issue of court packing. He repeatedly questioned why some Democrats specifically support adding 4 justices to the Supreme Court. His answer was blunt and strategic, because conservatives currently hold a 6-3 majority, and adding 4 new justices would instantly flip ideological control of the court. Jordan described this not as reform, but as a pursuit of raw political power. He argued that expanding the court would fundamentally damage public trust in judicial independence by turning the Supreme Court into another openly partisan institution shaped by whichever party controls Washington at a given moment. At the same time, supporters of Supreme Court reform see the situation very differently. Many progressives argue that recent court decisions on abortion, federal regulation, presidential authority, and voting rights have dramatically reshaped American law in ways they believe move too far from public opinion. Critics of the current court claim the judiciary has become increasingly ideological and insufficiently accountable. From that perspective, discussions about ethics reforms, term limits, or structural changes are viewed as efforts to restore balance and transparency rather than undermine the Constitution. That divide is exactly why hearings like this become so intense, because both sides genuinely believe the future direction of the country is tied directly to the Supreme Court itself. Another major issue raised indirectly during the hearing is the broader collapse of trust between political institutions in Washington. Jordan portrayed Democrats as willing to pressure the judiciary whenever they dislike court rulings, while critics of the court argue that conservative justices themselves have become too politically aligned with one ideological movement. The result is a political environment where nearly every Supreme Court decision now triggers accusations of corruption, extremism, or abuse of power from one side or the other. That growing distrust is significant because the Supreme Court relies heavily on public confidence and institutional legitimacy rather than direct political enforcement power. Ultimately, this hearing exposed just how central the Supreme Court has become in America's political and cultural battles. The exchange was about much more than constitutional procedure. It reflected deeper national divisions over power, accountability, and the role of government itself. Jordan's remarks energized conservatives who believe the judiciary is under coordinated political attack, while opponents argue that criticism of the court is necessary in a functioning democracy. But regardless of political perspective, one thing became very clear during this hearing: the fight over the Supreme Court is no longer just a legal debate. It has become one of the defining political conflicts shaping modern America, and tensions surrounding the court are only likely to intensify in the years ahead.